Welcome to the Woman's Connection. I'm Barrie-Louise Switzen, your moderator. The Woman's Connection is a program about events shaping women's lives and helping one gain authentic power on a personal or professional level. So won't you stay tuned?
Welcome. Did you ever go to a doctor's office and you go in with your ailments and they kind of listen to you and they recommend something, but yet you feel that it never works and you come back with the same ailments? Well, this happened to our guest, and she took it into her own hands to find out what was really going on with her body that the doctors didn't know. And I would like to welcome Michelle King Robson. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you, Barrie.
Thank you. How long had this been going on? Apparently you have something wrong with you, but nobody could really figure out what was going on, and you were left hanging. What was the problem?
The problem was I was losing my hormonal levels. So I started in my mid to late 30s, which is, typical of most women actually, but I did not know that at the time. And I was going into perimenopause. It was just that simple. And no one picked it up. So I started with sleeplessness, which is very common for women. And then from sleeplessness, I went to acid reflux and just a whole host of things. So that's how it started.
So you really went into menopause quite early.
Yes, I started perimenopause fairly early, although it's not as uncommon for women in their late 30s to actually start to lose their levels.
Oh, interesting. Now, what did you do, or how did you discover this?
Well, I didn't discover it right away, that's for sure. I actually continued to decline, so I had one health issue after another. And what was happening was nobody was really looking at the core issue, which was that I was losing my hormones. So it was more or less treating all the symptoms. So you have sleeplessness, okay, so we'll give you something to help you sleep. And you're suffering from a little bit of depression, so we'll give you something to take for that. And you're having, issues with acid reflux, so we'll give you a medication for that. No one ever looked at the core problem. And in the end, what they decided to do, what they thought was best, was to give me a complete hysterectomy at 42.
Oh my goodness. So nobody really looked at the core, and I think that's my whole feeling about the doctors today, or any doctor. They say, okay, let's fix the symptom,
right,
but never look at the core. And so people are getting sicker, and that's why I'm against so much medication. But so you went and had a hysterectomy?
I did. I would have done, if they had told me we're gonna cut your right arm off and you're gonna feel better, I would have said go right ahead, because I was so sick that I couldn't advocate for myself. I wasn't capable of doing that, and so I put it in their hands.
What was the catalyst that made you change and take your health back?
Well, after I had the complete hysterectomy, I really tanked. So, and people ask me a lot, what do you mean by tanked? And what happened to me was, when they removed everything, I went into full-blown menopause. And then everything starts to change. So I went down quickly, and it usually happens within the first 24 to 48 hours, which most women don't realize. So if you're not taking something to actually supplement those hormonal levels that you now have lost, then you get in big trouble. And that's what happened with me. Quite frankly, I just tanked to the point of I couldn't get out of bed anymore. I had no brain function. So you could ask me what kind of car I drove, and I could tell you the color, but I couldn't tell you the name of the car or the make of the car. I couldn't remember the ending to a movie. I had joint pain. I became bloated. I had weight gain. One minute I was fine. The next minute I couldn't fit into a pair of jeans. I was throwing one pair after another and thinking, what is going on with me? And I didn't want to get out of bed, and I was horribly depressed.
Wow. And what did the doctors say about this?
I kept going from doctor to doctor because they really didn't know how to treat me, or I was over-medicated. So again, it wasn't really that they knew how to treat those core issues. It was that they were treating all the symptoms. And I looked good, so a lot of what I heard was, well, you look great, so you can't possibly have something wrong with you. And you start to think that it's in your head. And that's really what happened with me, is I just started to second guess myself. And I became so depressed, and my quality of life became so poor that I didn't want to live anymore.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm glad you decided to change your outlook.
Thank you.
So how did you go about finding out what was really going on with yourself? What was the catalyst?
The catalyst for me was a doctor, my primary care physician, saying to me, I know there's something wrong with you. I just don't know how to fix it. But I know you're going to figure this out because you're smart. And you will figure it out, and you will come back to me, and we will have this discussion about how to be how you found the right course of treatment for you. And he really gave me permission, which I hadn't had. And to be honest with you, as hard as it was to hear that, I was so relieved in a lot of ways that he said that. And so it allowed me to start advocating for myself. So I started reading. I read 32 books on the subject of hormones. I became a hormone expert by default, as I say, because there was no one who could really help me. And I went all across the country talking to doctors and meeting with doctors, and most of the time being over-medicated or just not given what I needed. So I took matters into my own hands.
I am so floored. What made you pick up the books on hormones to begin with?
Well, I knew it was a hormonal issue. I mean, it was, after having the complete hysterectomy and then starting to listen to what the doctors were doing and the tests that they were giving me, I knew that it had to be a hormonal issue. What I didn't realize was that it was a hormonal issue that had actually started in my late 30s, that I started perimenopause. So all this started to track back, and it all started to really make sense. So after reading all of these books, and they were conflicted too, I will say, that one would say do this, and then one would say if you do this, then this is going to happen to you, and the other book would say, well, don't do this because you're going to have this problem. So it's hard to figure out what to do.
I'm just speechless, because to go through a hysterectomy when you don't have to that's such an invasion. I mean, for all these doctors, I mean, it's just, you've hit on a real sore spot with me.
Well, there's 650,000 unnecessary hysterectomies in the United States every year. And if I do nothing else, that's the message that I want to make sure gets pushed out, that there are a lot of other options and choices. It's just that we don't know about them.
Because of this situation with you, you did something creative. You started a website.
I did. I had started empowerher.com. And I started it because when I was searching for information and resources, and I was at my lowest point, I went on the web. I went to see if I could find another woman who was like me, who could validate how I was feeling. Even if they couldn't, tell me what to do to get well, if I would have just had that interaction with someone saying, I know where you are, I know you're going to be okay, because I was where you are and I'm on the other side of it, and here's some resources for you, and maybe we can find you some other women. And I couldn't find that, and I posted everywhere, and I couldn't find that. So I thought, if I ever do get well, that I'm going to make sure that no woman should have to go through what I went through and suffer in silence, which is what happens every day, all the time with women.
How did you start your website?
Well, I started with just the idea of I wanted to reach out to as many women as I could. So what better way to do that through the internet? And it was an interesting process that I went through, because I was not technology savvy at all. I could barely turn on a computer when I started Empower, but I knew that it was my destiny. I knew that this was what I was supposed to be doing and that I would figure it out. And I knew that I needed to touch as many women as I could, not just in the United States, but around the world. That was the goal, and the goal was to reach 5 million women and to affect change in women's health. Because one of the things that I learned was that women have not been treated fairly when it comes to their health and their wellness. Most of the studies are done on men. We're different than men. We look different than men, right?
Absolutely.
Same inside. It's the same thing. But yet, we haven't had the same treatment as far as prescription drugs. They're tested on men versus being tested on women. There's a lot of things that have gone on for far too long that need to change, and that was another reason why I started, because I wanted to be able to bring women together and have them have a voice, because we haven't really had a voice when it comes to our health, and we have not had options and choices of how we want to be treated. And quite frankly, we are different. What works for you is not necessarily going to work for me. It's so individualized, and it's the same holds true the opposite way. So you have to do what's best for you, and you have to advocate for yourself, which women really don't do.
Do you feel that women don't advocate for themselves because they feel, not inferior is not the right word, because they're made to feel, oh, you don't know anything?
There's a lot of that. There's also, I always say it's in our genes. I don't know where we got this from, but we will advocate for everybody else, right? We'll advocate for our children, our parents, our husbands, but when it comes to ourselves, I always say we leave our antenna at the door of the doctor's office. Now, if you take your child in, you know whether that doctor is going to work for you or not. I mean, it's instant. And you know whether that's a good thing or not for your child. But when we do it for ourselves, we don't really, we acquiesce to what the doctor is saying. And I call it the white coat syndrome. We get in there and we see the white coat, and there's about 40 seconds before we're interrupted most of the time, because there's not enough time being given. That's not the doctor's fault. It really is part of what's happened with the system and how healthcare has, transformed, so to speak, where you have to get in and get out. But we do have this. We feel like we don't know it, so we don't want to second guess. We don't want to come across as being snippy, or, there's other words I could use for that. But we don't, so we quite frankly keep our mouth shut.
I'm just going to go back a second. How did you feel when you found out that you had a hysterectomy, that it wasn't necessary?
Well, I don't know that it wasn't necessary. In my heart of hearts, I don't think it was. I mean, in my gut, my intuition tells me that it wasn't necessary. It was pretty difficult for me because it's such a radical procedure, and I don't think women really realize how life-altering it is and how it changes your life. And the doctors don't tell you that. All the effects that you're going to have afterwards, that you could have incontinence issues afterwards, which in most cases happens after you've had a complete hysterectomy. So then you're faced with one more thing, and then you're faced with one more, because you have to get the hormones balanced. And so it's just this windfall of things that happen. So how did I feel about it? I didn't feel good about it. I felt violated. Really, if I had to describe it, that's really how I felt. And I also felt like I hadn't done myself justice by asking the questions that I should have asked. And that was my fault. And I have to take responsibility for my own health and wellness. And I've learned that since.
Wow. I can... You have a touching story there that is so, I think a lot of women can understand, not so much if they have a hysterectomy, if they have something else that goes wrong with them, and how they're not taking the gospel of the doctors for themselves.
Right.
And that's basically where it is.
Well, and I think that, in all fairness, I think that, doctors are great. I mean, we have a lot of doctors on our website, and, they are amazing. Some of them are just extraordinary. But I still think that it has to come back to what's good for us. And when you go into a doctor's office and it doesn't feel right, it's because it's not right. And that's the point at which you get up and you leave. And you say, this isn't the way I want to be treated. I'm paying for this service. I'm paying for it. And I want what I want. And I think there's a certain amount of chemistry that you need to have with the doctor. And quite frankly, you can go find another doctor, and it may take you a few times to do it, but it's so worth it in the end because you get what you want. And then you have a relationship, and that's really what you need.
I'm just kind of curious, did you try any holistic medicine while you were trying to figure out what was wrong with you?
I did. I tried everything because I think you get into a situation where, you'll try anything to feel better. You'll just go to the extremes to feel better. And some of the things that I tried, quite frankly, were not good for me. But I didn't know it at the time. I learned it after the fact because when I actually got well, and it didn't take a lot to get me well, that was when it was very clear to me how much I'd been over-medicated.
When did you know that you were so over-medicated that this isn't working, and yet have the courage to move off of it?
Well, the last person that I went to see before finding the doctor that actually I say saved my life, I crawled. I literally crawled out of bed and crawled into my car to get to see this compounding pharmacist who was supposed to be really good with hormone replacement therapy. And so I went in there and I had a consultation with her, and I really got over-medicated, and I knew it, and I knew it within a very short period of time. And a friend of mine, who, women are great because we share information and resources, we love to do that, had sent me a book, and it was about this thick, and I said, there's no way I can read this book. I have no brain function. I can't remember anything. But she called me just out of the blue and said, have you read that book, Screaming to Be Heard? And I said, no. And she said, you need to read that book. So I said, okay, I'll try. And I stayed up for 2 days reading the book because it was me. All you had to do was take their name out of it and put my name in, and that was me. And I was so excited that my husband was next to me in bed, and I said, you have to read this chapter because I think I finally found the answer. And I knew that this was the right answer for me, and this was the right doctor.
How did you find the doctor?
She happened to be in my backyard.
Oh.
So I'd gone all over the country, and she happened to be in Tucson, and I live in Phoenix, and she had written 7 books on the subject. This was one of them. I love the title, Screaming to Be Heard, because that was me, only I was doing it silently. I didn't let anybody know what I was doing. I felt like, it must just be me, and I didn't want to ever say that I was suffering. So I called her up, and she had a 3-month wait. And I said, I can't wait 3 months. I can't wait 3 days. I need help. But I eventually got into her. I got on a waiting list, and when I went down to see her, she spent 3 hours with me, number one, which was amazing, and explained everything to me in detail so I understood it. And then she gave me 2 things to do. And those 2 things changed my life.
What two things did she give you to do?
She gave me a little estrogel to put on my arm, and she told me to buy a specific magnesium, Twin Labs magnesium, and to take that. And that was it. That was all she gave me. And I thought, You mean I came all the way down here, and then I was on 9 medications too, by the way, and she said, I'm going to start weaning you off a lot of these medications because you don't need them. So, and I'm thinking, well, this is really interesting. I'm going to be weaned off of 9 medications, and I'm getting a little gel, and I'm going to get some Twin Labs magnesium. I don't know, but I trusted her. And when I look back on it, the reason that she did that was she didn't want to introduce too many things into the mix, because then if something isn't working, let's say the gel doesn't work on me, then we don't know what it is. Is it the gel? Is it testosterone? What is it that's causing the problem? So it's always one thing first, and start with that one thing, and then you can move forward and introduce other things. So in the end, what happened with me is I started to feel better within 4 days. And I really got angry.
And so what did you do when you finally got angry?
Well, that's when I said, I'm going to put this website together. I'm going to do this, because the fix was so easy, and yet it seems so complex.
After you were told to use the 2 medications and you were weaned off all your other, did you only end up with the 2, or did you end up with more than 2, or are you on nothing right now?
Well, here's what I did. I still take thyroid medication because I need to. So once they had said I had thyroid disease, then of course I was put on medication, and so I still take that. So she didn't wean me off the medication, she changed it. But what we did do is I ended up doing not the gel. The gel worked for me okay, but it wasn't the perfect solution for me. But what was a patch, a transdermal patch. Now, there are different types of patches, and they're unique to your own body. So one patch would work fine on me and another wouldn't work at all. So you have to test to make sure that it actually is working through blood work. That's the most accurate way to find out. Then I had a little bit of testosterone cream introduced after about 2 months. That was extraordinary. That changed everything. If the estradiol wasn't enough, just adding that little bit of testosterone brought my brain function back. It caused me to lose the weight, shed the weight that I had gained. It helped me build muscle back. It helps build bone, which most women who have hysterectomies will have osteoporosis because they don't get enough of what they need to keep their bones healthy. So in my case, that was what I needed, was just a little bit of estradiol, a little bit of testosterone, and then of course I took my Twin Labs magnesium.
What type of a doctor was she that you finally found her?
She actually was a psychiatrist, interestingly enough. Started as a psychiatrist and trained at Johns Hopkins. And she saw women all the time come in who were, in their 40s, late 30s, 40s, and 50s, who were having a lot of troubles, a lot of problems, a lot of health issues, along with the mental acuity not being quite right, and there was just a lot of things going on. So she really started to pay attention to what was happening, and that's what made her decide to go in this direction. And she started to research it, and she was, like all of us who actually learn about this after going through an experience like this, you see the myth, the misunderstandings that are out there with regard to women and hormones. And I think she just made it her life's mission to make sure that women like me got the help that I needed.
You decided then to do this website. How did you come up with a plan, and how did you get funding for it?
Well, I actually was so adamant about getting the site built and done and created that I funded it myself, and which is unusual. But I've worked in philanthropy. I've been a philanthropist for many years, and I decided that this would be something this would be a way for me to give back, and give back to the world, and give back to women. So I put my money where my mouth was.
That's fantastic. Because I know I went on your site, empowerher.com, and I noticed you had some sponsors and you had quite a bit of information there.
At Empower Her, it's really, for us, it's what we say every day is, what's in it for her? And if you can't tell us what's in it for her and why this is good for her, then you just can't participate on our website. It's just that simple. We want to make sure that women get the best information that they can, have access to great resources, be able to share with one another, because that's really the core of what we're doing, is having the ability for women to share. We did a poll on the site, interestingly enough. What we found is that with our women, that 82% said that they would trust another woman that they didn't know before they would trust their doctor.
That's incredible.
Yes.
That is absolutely incredible.
But it makes sense.
Yes.
It really does make sense. You and I can have a conversation. You could tell me something, and I'll go buy that book, or because I trust you. And we may only have that exchange of information once, but it's enough that I will go do what you tell me to do.
So what's next on your plate?
What's next on my plate is just creating awareness, continuing to grow the company, but just really creating the awareness for women, being able to go to Washington and say, we don't want this law passed because it's not good for us, or you need to pay more attention to this because we need more drug testing on women, we need more clinical trials, and here are 1 million women who have come together and said, we want to make this change. And that's one of the key reasons why I started the company. And I made it a for-profit entity because I knew that I could lobby and be much more powerful on the Hill than I could if it was a nonprofit. So I'm also launching a nonprofit. I'm in the process of writing a book, and we've just come out. I'm in a documentary called Hot Flash Havoc.
One of these wonderful women who have taken adversity and turned it into a very powerful healing situation.
I'm not sorry that this happened to me. I can honestly say that I'm actually glad that it happened to me. Because if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't have the opportunity to do what I'm doing today and to really be helpful and really help women with their health. And if it took my situation to do something that's going to better women, then I'm okay with that. In fact, I'm actually honored to be able to do this.
In the closing moments of the show, what would you like to leave the audience with?
I would say that women need to just learn how to love themselves and advocate for themselves, and truly know that if they don't take care of themselves, they aren't going to be able, they won't take care of their family because they won't be able to. They won't be well enough and feel good enough to do that. Quality of life, there's something to be said about quality of life. And I didn't have it. So I know what it's like to have it and then lose it. And you don't want to lose it. And you always want to make sure, I don't care what age you are, it doesn't matter. You should always feel great. Not good, not okay, but you should feel great.
How did your family respond?
Well, my family thought I was crazy at one point in time, especially when I was going through all the hormonal issues. Quite frankly, I did as well, because my moods were so up and down. I will say this, though, that my husband and my daughter couldn't be any more happy and or proud of me for what I'm doing today. I'm not home as much as I was before because I'm out there advocating for women, but they have been amazing, and I think they've seen me turn this from lemons to lemonade.
Taken and turned it around to help women. And I hope you've learned something, that you are not alone either on your health issue. Check out empowerher.com, or even search the web and see what alternatives you have on your health situation. We'd love to hear from you. Please write us here at the Women's Connection, and Michelle will be very happy to answer your questions. Look forward to hearing from you. Bye now.